Sri Ramakrishna, and I'll begin with a chant. This is the meditation on Sri Ramakrishna. Om Hridaya Kamala Madhye Rajitam Nirvikalpam Sada Sadakila Vedati Kameka Swarupam Prakriti Vikriti Shunyam Nityam Anandamurtim Vimala Paramahamsam Ramakrishnam Bhajamaha Nirupamati Shukshmam Nishprapancham Nirhiham Gagana Sadrisham Isham Sarvabhutadivasam Triguna Rahita Satchit Brahma Rupam Varenyam Vimala Paramahamsam Ramakrishnam Bhajamaha Vitaritum avatirnam jnana bhakti prashantihi Pranaya galata chittam jiva dukkha sahishnu Drita sahaja samadhim chinmayam komalangam Vimala paramahamsam Ramakrishnam bhajamaha. This knower of Brahman, ever established in his own nature, full of wisdom, self-possessed and self-lighted, eternal, the very image of that Brahman who is pure bliss, shining ceaselessly in the lotus of the heart, one alone and without parts, pure and still. This Ramakrishna, Paramatman Supreme, we adore. Subtle, fine and luminous, not even the shadow of the gross can ever reach him, for his purity is without parallel, untouched by Maya's webs of deceit, beyond the dark river of time and desire, vast as the sky, this Supreme Lord, the very essence of Brahman as existence and light. This Ramakrishna, Paramatman Supreme, we adore. Saturated with divine consciousness, his home is in all. He hears every cry. He knows every pain. Under the weight of its compassion, his heart can deny the need of none. Born to raise the world with teachings of knowledge, love, and peace. Born to bring mankind fresh songs of joy. This certain refuge of all, this Ramakrishna, Paramahamsam, Paramatman Supreme, we adore. So we are in the 14th chapter, and we're about halfway through, 302, and it's the instruction to the Vaishnavas and the Brahmos. And in the last reading, I'll just review a little bit what he talked about: the 8 fetters, which are shame, hatred, lineage, fear, caste, pride of good conduct, secrecy, and grief. And he talks a little bit about how to get rid of them. He said that the gopis got rid of all except shame, and that's why when their clothes were stolen, they hid, But the company of holy men, he says, and the grace of the Guru, through those things you can get rid of these 8 fetters. And these are the things that are, he said, fastened to us. And then he talked about the 6 passions, and that's lust, anger, greed, jealousy, delusion of I and mine, and pride. And I don't know if you've studied philosophy, Descartes had 6 passions or emotion, and his are different. They're wonder, love, hate, desire, joy, and sadness. But the 6 passions that Sri Ramakrishna talks about are all obstacles, and he says they should all be turned toward God. So even the impulse of lust should be turned into the desire to have union with God. And you should feel angry at those who stand in your way toward this union, if somebody's blocking your devotions. And you should feel greedy for him because you want to have him. And if you have to have the feeling of I and mine, then associate it with God. He says, say, for instance, my Rama, my Krishna. And if you have to have pride, then you should be like Vibhishana, who said, I've touched the feet of Rama with my head, and I can't bow this head before anybody else. So that's sort of, somebody asked about getting rid of them, and this is what he himself says in this chapter. And I usually start out with reading a little bit about one of the close disciples or someone who had association with Sri Ramakrishna and their interaction a little bit with him, just to give you sometimes it's how they were initiated or how he treated them. So this was Swami Brahmananda. One morning I was meditating in the Kali temple and I couldn't concentrate my mind. This made me very sad, and I said to myself, I've been coming here for so long, yet I haven't achieved anything. What is the use of staying here then? Forget it. I'm not going to say anything about it to the master. If this depressed condition continues another 2 or 3 days, I'll return home. There my mind will be occupied with many other things. So having decided this in the shrine, he returned to the master's room, and the master was then walking on the veranda, and seeing me, he entered the room. It was customary after returning from the shrine to salute the master and then eat a light breakfast. As soon as I saluted the master, he said, look, when you returned from the shrine, I saw your mind seem to be covered with a thick net. I realized that he knew everything, so I said, Sir, you know the bad condition of my mind. Then he wrote something on my tongue. Immediately I forgot my painful depression and was overwhelmed with an inexpressible joy. This is one of the ways that Ramakrishna initiated people. He did the same thing with giving the Rama mantra to Vivekananda. So, writing something on the tongue. Another day, Rakal was meditating in the Nat Mandir, and the master arrived in an ecstatic mood. Addressing Rakal, Ramakrishna said, look, this is your mantra, and here is your chosen deity. And immediately he saw the luminous form of God in front of him. He was overwhelmed. He was convinced that his guru had the power to show God to anyone. Filled with ecstatic devotion, Rakal fell at the feet of the master and became absorbed in meditation. Under Ramakrishna's guidance, Rakal began to practice intense spiritual disciplines. He forgot day and night as well as food and family. The master taught his spiritual son various kinds of disciplines, such as asanas, mudras, japa, meditation, yoga, and other practices. And one day the master initiated Rakal into the path of Shakti before the Divine Mother and taught him how to practice meditation on the different centers in the Kundalini. Rakal used to secretly practice these disciplines, and he recalled, once I was meditating in the Panchavati at noon while the master was talking about the manifestation of Brahman as sound. Listening to that discussion, even the birds in the Panchavati began to sing the Vedic songs. I could hear them. So other sages have also heard the birds singing the different Upanishads and things. So don't ask me. Anyway, sound. So here we are on page 203. And he just sang a couple of songs to the Divine Mother. Sarada was stricken with grief on account of his son's death, so Adar had taken him to Dakshineswar to visit the master. Sarada was a devotee of Sri Chaitanya. Sri Ramakrishna looked at him and was inspired with the ideal of Gauranga. He sang, "Why has my body turned so golden? It is not time for this to be. Many the ages that must pass before as Gauranga I appear. Here in the age of Dwapara, my sport is not yet at an end. How strange this transformation is. The peacock glistens, all of gold, and golden too, the cuckoo gleams. Everything around me here has turned to gold. Naught else appears but gold, whichever way I look. What can it mean, this miracle that everything I see is gold? I can guess its meaning now. Radha has come to Mathura, and that is why my skin is gold, for she is like the Brahmara, and so has given me her hue. Dark blue my body was but now, yet in the twinkling of an eye it turned to gold. I have become Radha by contemplating her. I cannot imagine where I am, in Mathura or Navadvip. But how could this have come to pass? Not yet is Balarama born as Nityai, nor Narada become Shrivas, nor Yashoda as Mother Sachi yet returned. Then why should I, among them all alone, assume a golden face? Not yet is Father Nanda born as Jagannath. Then why should I be thus transmitted into gold? Perhaps because in Mathura, sweet Radha has appeared. My skin has borrowed Gauranga's golden hue. Sri Ramakrishna sang again, still overpowered with the ideal of Gauranga. Surely Gauranga is lost in a state of blissful ecstasy. In an exuberance of joy, he laughs and weeps and dances and sings. He takes a wood for Vrindavan, the Ganges for the blue Yamuna. Loudly he sobs and weeps, yet though he has all gold without, he is black within, black with the blackness of Krishna. The master continued to sing, assuming the attitude of a woman devotee infatuated with love for Gauranga. Why do my neighbors raise such a scandal? Why do they cast aspersions upon me simply because of Gauranga? How can they understand my feeling? How can I explain? Can I ever explain it all? Alas, to whom shall I explain it all? But they make me die of shame. Once upon a time in the house of Shrivasa, Gaura was loudly singing the kirtan. When on the ground of the courtyard falling, he rolled in ecstasy. I, who was standing near him, seeing him where he lay entranced, was suddenly lost to outward sense until the wife of Shrivasa revived me. Another day in the Bhakta's procession, Gaura was sweetly singing the kirtan. Clasping the outcast to him, he softened the unbeliever's heart. Through Nadia's marketplace, he chanted Lord Hari's holy name. I followed the throng, and from close by caught a glimpse of his golden feet. Once by the Ganges bank he stood, his body bright as sun and moon, charming all with his beauty. I too had come to fetch some water, and as I looked from one side, my water jar slipped and fell to the ground. My sister-in-law, the gossip, saw me, and now she's spreading it everywhere. Balaram's father was a Vaishnava, hence the master also sang of the divine love of the gopis for their beloved Krishna. I have not found my Krishna, O friend, how cheerless my home without him. Ah, if Krishna could only be the hair on my head, Carefully I should braid it then and deck it with the balku flowers. Carefully I should fashion the braids out of my Krishna's hair. Krishna is black. Black is my hair. Black would be one with black. Oh, if Krishna could only be the ring I wear in my nose. Always from my nose he would hang and my two lips could touch him. But it can never be, alas. Why should I idly dream? Why should Krishna care at all to be the ring in my nose? Ah, if Krishna could only be the bracelets on my arms, always he would cling to my wrist, and proudly I should walk, shaking my bracelets to make them sound, shaking my arms to show them. Down the king highways I would walk, wearing my Krishna bracelets. Balaram's father was a wealthy man, with estates in different parts of Orissa. An Orthodox member of the Vaishnava sect, he had built temples and arranged for distribution of food to the pilgrims at various holy places. He had been spending the last years of his life in Vrindavan. The Vaishnavas, for the most part, are bigoted in their religious views. Some of them harbor malicious feeling toward the followers of Tantra and Vedanta. But Sri Ramakrishna never encouraged such a narrow outlook. According to his teachings, through earnestness and yearning, all lovers of God will ultimately reach the same goal. The master began the conversation in order to broaden the religious views of Balaram's father. Master to M. Once I thought, why should I be one-sided? Therefore, I was initiated into Vaishnavism in Vrindavan and took the garb of a Vaishnava monk. I spent 3 days practicing the Vaishnava discipline. Again, at Dakshineswar, I was initiated into the mystery of Rama worship. I painted my forehead with a long mark and put on a string with a diamond around my neck. After a few days, I gave them up. A certain man had a tub. Everyone would come to him to have their clothes dyed. The tub contained a solution of dye. Whatever color a man wanted for his cloth, he would get it by dipping the cloth in the tub. One man was amazed to see this, and he said to the dyer, "Please give me the dye you have in your tub." Was the master hinting that people professing different religions would come to him and have their spiritual consciousness awakened according to their own ideals? Master to Balaram's father, don't read any books anymore, but you may read books on devotion, such as the life of Chaitanya. The whole thing is to love God and to taste his sweetness. He is sweetness, and the devotee is its enjoyer. The devotee drinks the sweet bliss of God. Further, God is the lotus and the devotee the bee. The devotee sips the honey from the lotus. As a devotee cannot live without God, so also God cannot live without his devotee. Then the devotee becomes the sweetness, and God its enjoyer. The devotee becomes the lotus, and God the bee. It is the Godhead that has become these two in order to enjoy its own bliss. That is the significance of Radha and Krishna. At the beginning of spiritual life, the devotee should observe such rites as pilgrimage, putting on beads around his neck, and so forth. But outward ceremonies gradually drop off as he attains the goal, the vision of God. Then his only activity is in the repetition of God's name and contemplation and meditation on him. The pennies equivalent to 16 rupees make a great heap, but 16 silver coins do not look like such a big amount. Yet the quantity becomes much smaller when you change the 16 rupees into 1 gold moher. And if you change the gold into tiny pieces of diamond, people hardly would notice it. Orthodox Vaishnavas insisted on the outer insignias of religion. They criticize any devotee who does not wear these marks. Was that why the Master said that after the vision of God, a devotee becomes indifferent to the outer marks, giving up formal worship when the goal of spiritual life is attained? Master to Balaram's father. The Kartabhajist group the devotees into 4 classes: the Pravrajika, the Sadhaka, the Siddhi, and the Siddha of the Siddha. The Pravrajika, the beginner, puts the mark of his religion on his forehead and wears a string of beads around his neck and observes outer conventions. The Sadhaka, the struggling devotee, does not care much for elaborate rites. An example of this class is the Bao. The Siddha, the perfect, firmly believes that God exists. The Siddha of the Siddha, the supremely perfect, like Chaitanya, not only has realized God, but also has become intimate with him and talks with him all the time. This is the last limit of realization. This is sort of like what Sri Ramakrishna describes as the vijnana state. There are many kinds of spiritual aspirants. Those endowed with sattva perform their spiritual practices secretly. They look like ordinary people, but they meditate inside the mosquito net. Aspirants endowed with rajas exhibit outward pomp, a string of beads around their neck, a mark on their foreheads, an ochre cloth, a silk cloth, a rosary with a gold bead, and so on. They're like stall keepers, advertising their wares with signboards. Sri Ramakrishna once said the ochre cloth is like a collar of a dog, saying that you belong to somebody. All religions and all paths call upon their followers to pray to one and the same God. Therefore, one should not show any disrespect to any religion or religious opinion. It is God alone who is called Satchidananda Brahman in the Vedas, Satchidananda Krishna in the Puranas, and Satchidananda Shiva in the Tantras. It is one and the same, Satchidananda. There are different sects of Vaishnavas. That which is called Brahman in the Vedas is called Alek Niranjan by one Vaishnava sect. Alek means that which cannot be pointed out or perceived by the sense organs. According to this sect, Radha and Krishna are only 2 bubbles of the Alek. According to the Vedanta, there is no incarnation of God. The Vedantas say that Rama and Krishna are but 2 waves in the ocean of Satchidananda. In reality, there are not 2. There is only one. A man may call on God by any name. If he is sincere in his prayer, he will certainly reach him. He will succeed if he has longing. As Sri Ramakrishna spoke these words to the devotees, he was overwhelmed with divine fervor. Coming down to partial consciousness of the world, he said to Balaram's father, "Are you the father of Balaram?" All sat in silence. Balaram's aged father was silently telling his beads, "Master, to M and the others, while these people practice so much japa and they go to so many sacred places, but why are they like this? Why do they make no progress? In their case, it seems as if the year consists of 18 months. That'd be hard to hear if you were the one doing it. Once I said to Harish, "What is the use of going to Benares if one does not feel restless for God? And if one feels that longing, then this very place is Benares. They make so many pilgrimages and repeat the name of God so much, but why do they not realize anything? It is because they have no longing for God. God reveals himself to the devotee only if he calls on him with a longing heart. At the beginning of the yatra performance, much light-hearted restlessness is observed on the stage. At that time, one does not see Krishna. Next, the sage Narada enters with his flute and sings longingly, "O Govinda, O my life, O my soul." Then Krishna can no longer remain away and appears with the cowherd boys. Tuesday, October 16th, 1883. Sri Ramakrishna was in his room with Rakhal, Balaram's father, Benny Paul, M., Mani Malak, Ishan, Kishori, and other devotees. Master, liberal-minded devotees accept all the forms of God, Krishna, Kali, Shiva, Rama, and so forth. Balaram's father, yes, sir. It is like a woman recognizing her husband, whatever clothes he wears. Master, but again, there is a thing called nishtha, single-minded devotion. When the gopis went to Mathura, they saw Krishna with a turban on his head, and at this they pulled down their veils and said, "Who is this man? Where is our Krishna, with the peacock feather on his crest and the yellow cloth on his body?" Hanuman also had that unswerving devotion. He came to Dwarka in the cycle of Dvipara. Krishna said to Rukmini, his queen, "Hanuman will not be satisfied unless he sees the form of Rama. So please, to please Hanuman, Krishna assumed the form of Rama." There's another place where he is asked, "Oh, please take up your bow and be Rama." My dear sir, I am in a peculiar state of mind. My mind constantly descends from the absolute to the relative, and again ascends from the relative to the absolute. The attainment of the absolute is called knowledge of Brahman, but it is extremely difficult to acquire. A man cannot acquire the knowledge of Brahman unless he completely rids himself of his attachment to the world. When the Divine Mother was born as the daughter of the king of Himalaya, she showed her various forms to her father. The king said, "I want to see Brahman." Therefore the Divine Mother said, "Father, if that is your desire, then you must seek the company of holy men. You must go into solitude, away from the world, now and then, and live in holy company." Swami Brahmananda once said, spirituality is caught, not taught. So it's in the company that it is transferred. The manifold has come from the one alone, relative from the absolute. There is a place of consciousness where the many disappears and the one as well. For the many must exist as long as the one exists. Brahman is without comparison. It is impossible to explain Brahman by analogy. It is between light and darkness. It is light, but not the light we perceive, not material light. There's a song that Swamiji wrote, I don't remember it all, but part of it is, "Behold, it comes in might, the power that is not power, the light that is in darkness." Anyway, it goes on like that, and it's that which is between. Again, when Swamiji changes, got on Swamiji. Again, when God changes the state of my mind, when he brings my mind down to the plane of the relative, I perceive that it is he who has become all these, the creator, Maya, the living beings, and the universe. Again, sometimes he shows me that he has created the universe and all the living beings. He is the master and the universe, his garden. He is the master, and the universe and all its living beings belong to him. That is knowledge. And I am the doer, I am the guru, I am the father. That is ignorance. This is my house, this is my family, this is my wealth, these are my relatives. This also is ignorance. Balaram's father: that is true, sir, master. As long as you do not feel that God is the master, you must come back to the world. You must be born again and again. There will be no rebirth when you can truly say, "Oh God, thou art the master." As long as you cannot say, "O Lord, thou art real," you will not be released from the life in the world. This going and coming, this rebirth is inevitable. There will be no liberation. Further, what can you achieve by saying, "It is mine"? The manager of an estate may say, "This is our garden house. These are our couches and furniture." But when he is dismissed by the master, he hasn't the right to take away even a chest of worthless mango wood given to him for his use. The feelings of I and mine have covered the reality. Because of this, we do not see the truth. Attainment of Chaitanya, divine consciousness, is not possible without the knowledge of Advaita non-duality. After realizing Chaitanya, that is consciousness, one enjoys Nityananda, eternal bliss. One enjoys this bliss after attaining the state of a Paramahamsa. Vedanta does not recognize the incarnation of God. According to it, Chaitanya Deva is only a bubble of the non-dual Brahman. Do you know what the vision of divine consciousness is like? It is like the sudden illumination of a dark room when a match is struck. The incarnation of God is accepted by those who follow the path of bhakti. A woman belonging to the Kartabhaja sect observed my condition and remarked, "You have inner realization. Don't dance and sing too much. Ripe grapes must be preserved carefully in cotton." The mother-in-law lessens her daughter-in-law's activities when the daughter-in-law is with child. One characteristic of God realization is that the activities of a man with such realization gradually drop away. Inside this man, meaning Sri Ramakrishna, is the real jewel. Watching me eat, she remarked, "Sir, are you yourself eating or are you feeding someone else?" The feeling of ego has covered the truth. Narendra once said, "As the eye of man recedes, the eye of God approaches." Kedar said, "The more clay there is in a jar, the less water it holds." Krishna said to Arjuna, "Brother, you will not realize me if you possess even one of the 8 siddhas. These only give a little power. With healing and the like, one may do only a little good to others. Isn't that true? Therefore, I pray to the Divine Mother for pure love only, a love that does not seek any return. I never asked for occult powers." While talking thus, Sri Ramakrishna went into samadhi. He sat there motionless, completely forgetting the outer world. Then, coming down to the sense world, he sang, "Ah, friend, I have not found him yet whose love has driven me mad." At the Master's request, Ramlal sang a song describing how Chaitanya embraced the monastic life. Oh, what a vision I have beheld in Keshav Bharati's hut. Gora, in all his matchless grace, shedding tears in 1,000 streams, like a mad elephant he dances in ecstasy and sings, drunk with an overwhelming love. Rolling flat on the ground and swimming in his tears, he weeps and shouts Lord Hari's name, piercing the very heavens with his cries, loud as a lion's roar. Then most humbly he begs men, love, to feel himself the servant of the Lord. Shorn of his locks, he has put on the yogi's ochre cloth. Even the hardest heart must melt to see his pure and heavenly love. Smitten by man's deep woe, he has abandoned everything and pours out love unstintingly. Oh, would that Prem Das were his slave, and passing from door to door, might sing Gauranga's endless praise. The Master asked Mani Malak to quote the words of Tulsidas to the effect that one who had developed love of God could not observe caste distinctions. Mani. The throat of the chatak bird is pierced with thirst. All around are the waters of the Ganga, the Jamuna, the Sarju, and innumerable other rivers and lakes. But the bird will not touch any of these. It only looks up expectantly for the rain that falls when the star Swati is in the ascendant. Master, that means that love for the lotus feet of God is alone real, and everything else is illusory. Mani. Tulsi also said, at the touch of the philosopher's stone, the 8 metals become gold. Likewise, all castes, even the butchers and the untouchables, become pure by repeating Hari's name. Without Hari's name, the people of the 4 castes are but butchers. Master, the hide that the scriptures forbid one to touch can be taken inside of the temple after it has been tanned. A man becomes pure by repeating the name of God. Therefore, one should practice chanting the name of God. I said to Jadu Malik's mother, in the hour of death, you will think only of worldly things, of family, children, executing the will, and so forth. The thought of God will not come to your mind. The way to remember God in the hour of death is to practice now the repetition of his name and the chanting of his glories. If one keeps up this practice, then in the hour of death one will repeat the name of God. When the cat pounces on the bird only squawks, and it doesn't say Rama, Rama, and Hare Krishna. It is good to prepare for death. One should constantly think of God and chant his name in solitude during the last years of one's life. If the elephant is put in the stable after its bath, it is not soiled again by dirt and dust. They say if you chant enough, it becomes just like your own heartbeat. It just is going on constantly within you. Balaram's father, Mani Malak, Penny Bal, were elderly men. Did the Master give this instruction especially for their benefit? Master, why do I ask you to think of God and chant his name in solitude? Living in the world day and night, one suffers from worries. Haven't you noticed brother killing brother for a foot of land? The Sikh said to me, the cause of all worry and confusion are these 3, land, woman, and money. You are leading a householder's life. Why should you be afraid of the world? When Rama said to Dasaratha that he was going to renounce the world, it worried his father, and the king sought counsel of Vasishta. Vasishta said to Rama, Rama, why should you give up the world? Reason with me. Is this world outside of God? What is there to renounce, and what is there to accept? Nothing would ever exist but God. It is Brahman alone that appears as Ishvara, Maya, living beings, and the universe. Balaram's father, it's very difficult, sir. Master, the aspirant, while practicing spiritual discipline, looks upon the world as the framework of illusion. Again, after the attainment of knowledge, the vision of God, this very world becomes to him a mansion of mirth. It is written in the books of the Vaishnavas, God can be attained through faith alone. Reasoning pushes him far away. Faith alone. What faith Krishna Kishori had. At Vrindavan, a low-caste man drew water for him from a well. Krishna Kishore said to him, repeat the name of Shiva. After the man had repeated the name of Shiva, Krishna Kishore unhesitatingly drank the water. He used to say, if a man chants the name of God, does he need to spend money anymore for the atonement of his sins? How foolish. He was amazed to see people worshiping God with the sacred tulsi leaf in order to get rid of their illnesses. At the bathing ghat, here, he said to us, please bless me, sir, that I may pass my days repeating Rama's holy name. Whenever I went to his house, he would dance with joy at the sight of me. Rama said to Lakshmana, brother, wherever you find people singing and dancing in the ecstasy of divine love, know for certain that I am there. Chaitanya is an example of such ecstatic love. He laughed and wept and sang and danced in divine ecstasy. He was an incarnation. God incarnated himself through Chaitanya. Sri Ramakrishna sang a song describing the divine love of Chaitanya. Then Balaram's father, Mani Malik, Benipal, and several others took leave of the master. In the evening, devotees from Kansaritola, Calcutta, arrived. The master danced and sang with them in a state of divine fervor. After dancing, he went into a spiritual mood and said, I shall go part of the way myself. Kishore came forward to massage his feet, but the master didn't allow anyone to touch him. Ishan arrived. The master was seated, still in a spiritual mood, and after a while he became engaged in talk with Ishan. It was Ishan's desire to practice the Purusharana of the Gayatri. Master to Ishan, follow your own intuitions. I hope there is no more doubt in your mind. Is there any? The path of the Vedas is not meant for the Kali Yuga. The path of Tantra is efficacious. Ishan, I have almost resolved to perform an atonement ceremony. Master, do you mean to say that one cannot follow the path of Tantra? That which is Brahman is also Shakti, Kali. Knowing the secret that Kali is one with the highest Brahman, I have discarded once and for all both righteousness and sin. Ishan, it is mentioned in a hymn in the Chandi that Brahman alone is the primordial energy. Brahman is identical with Shakti. It will not do simply to express the idea in words. Only when you assimilate it will it be well for you. When the heart becomes pure through the practice of spiritual discipline, then one rightly feels that God alone is the doer. He alone has become the mind, the life, the intelligence. We are only his instruments. Thou it is that holdest the elephant in the mire, thou that helpest the lame man scale the loftiest hill. When your heart becomes pure, then you will realize that it is God who makes us perform such rites as the Purushcharana. Thou also workest thy own work. Men only call it theirs. All doubts disappear after the realization of God. Then the devotee meets the favorable wind. He becomes free from worry. He's like a boatman who, when the favorable wind blows, unfurls the sail, holds the rudder lightly, and enjoys the smoke. Ishan took his leave, and Sri Ramakrishna talked with M. No one else was present. He asked him what he thought of Narendra, Rakal, Adar, and Hazra, and whether they were guileless, and asked the master, "What do you think of me?" M said, "You are simple and at the same time deep. It is extremely difficult to understand you." Sri Ramakrishna laughed. November 26, 1883. It was the day of the annual festival for the Sindhurapati Brahmo Samaj. The ceremony was to be performed in Mani Malak's house. The worship hall was beautifully decorated with flowers, wreaths, evergreens, and many devotees were assembled, eagerly awaiting the worship. Their enthusiasm had been greatly heightened by the news that Sri Ramakrishna was going to grace the occasion with his presence. Keshav, Vijay, Shivanath, and other leaders of the Brahmo Samaj held him in high respect. His God-intoxicated state of mind, his intense love of spiritual life, his burning faith, his intimate communion with God, and his respect for women, whom he regarded as veritable manifestations of the Divine Mother, together with the unsullied purity of his character, his complete renunciation of worldly talk, his love and respect for religious faiths, and his eagerness to meet devotees of all creeds, attracted the members of the Brahmo Samaj to him. Devotees who came that day from far-off places to join the festival, for it would give them a chance to get a glimpse of the Master and listen to his inspiring talk. Sri Ramakrishna arrived at the house before the worship began and became engaged in conversation with Vijay Krishna Goswami and the other devotees. The lamps were lighted and the divine service was about to begin. The Master asked if Shivanath would come to the festival. A Brahmo devotee said that he had other important things to do and was not coming. Master: I feel very happy when I see Shivanath. He always seems to be absorbed in the bliss of bhakti. Further, a man who is respected by so many surely possesses some divine power, but he has one great defect. He doesn't keep his word. Once he said to me that he would come to Dakshineswar, but he neither came nor sent me word. That's not good. It is said that truthfulness alone constitutes a spiritual discipline of the Kali Yuga. If a man clings tenaciously to truth, he ultimately realizes God. Without this regard for truth, one gradually loses everything. If by chance I say that I will go to the pine grove, I must go there even if there's no further need of it, lest I lose my attachment to truth. After my vision of the Divine Mother, I prayed to her, taking a flower in my hands. Mother, here is thy knowledge, here is thy ignorance. Take them both and give me only pure love. Here is thy holiness, here is thy unholiness. Take them both, Mother, and give me pure love. Here is thy good, and here is thy evil. Take them both, Mother, and give me pure love. Here is thy righteousness, here is thy unrighteousness. Take them both, Mother, and give me pure love. I mentioned all these, but I could not say, Mother, here is thy truth, and here is thy falsehood. Take them both. I gave up everything at her feet, but I could not bring myself to give up truth. Soon the service began, according to the rules of the Brahmo Samaj. The preacher was seated on a dais. After the opening prayer, he recited the holy texts of the Vedas and was joined by the congregation in the invocation of the Supreme Brahman. They chanted in chorus. Brahman is truth, knowledge, and infinity. It shines as bliss and immortality. Brahman is peace, blessedness, the one without a second. It is pure and unstained by sin. The minds of the devotees were stilled and they closed their eyes in meditation. The master went into deep samadhi. He sat there transfixed and speechless. After some time he opened his eyes, looked around, and suddenly stood up with the words, Brahman, Brahman, on his lips. Soon the devotional music began, accompanied by drums and cymbals, and in a state of divine fervor, the master began to dance with the devotees. Vijay and the other Brahmos danced around him. The guests and the devotees were enchanted. Many of them drank the sweet bliss of God's name and forgot the world. The happiness of the material world appeared bitter to them, at least for the time being. After kirtan, all sat around the master, eager to hear his words. It is difficult to lead the life of a householder in a spirit of detachment. Once Pratap said to me, Sir, we follow the example of King Janaka. He led the life of a householder in a detached spirit. We shall follow him. I said to him, can one be like King Janaka by mere wishing it? How many austerities he practiced in order to acquire divine knowledge. He practiced the most intense form of asceticism for many years, and then only returned to the life of the world. Is there then no hope for householders? Certainly there is. They must practice spiritual discipline in solitude for some days. Thus they will acquire knowledge and devotion. Then it will not hurt them to lead a life in the world. But when you practice discipline in solitude, keep yourself entirely away from your family. You must not allow your wife's son, daughter, mother, father, sister, brother, friends, or relations near you. While thus practicing discipline in solitude, you should think, I have no one else in the world. God is my all. You must also pray to him with tears in your eyes for knowledge and devotion. If you ask me how long you should live in solitude away from your family, I should say to you, it would be good to you if you could spend even one day in such a manner. 3 days at a time are still better. One may live in solitude for 12 days, a month, 3 months, a year, according to one's convenience and ability. One hasn't much to fear if one leads the life of a householder after attaining knowledge and devotion. If you break a jackfruit after rubbing your hands with oil, then its sticky milk will not smear your hands. While playing the game of hide and seek, you are safe. If you but once touch the granny, be turned into gold by touching the philosopher's stone. After that, you may remain buried underground 1,000 years. When you're taken out, you will still be gold. The mind is like milk. If you keep the mind in the world, which is like water, then the milk and the water will get mixed. That's why people keep milk in a quiet place and let it set into curd, then churn the butter from it. Likewise, through spiritual discipline, practice in solitude, Churn the butter of knowledge and devotion from the milk of the mind. Then that butter can be easily kept in the water of the world. It will not get mixed with the world. The mind will float, detached on the water of the world. Vijay had just returned from Gaya, where he had spent a long time in solitude and holy company. He'd put on the ochre cloth of a monk and was in an exalted state of mind, always indrawn. He was sitting before the master with his head bent down, as if absorbed in some deep thought. Casting his benign glance on Vijay, the master said, "Vijay, have you found your room? Let me tell you a parable. Once 2 holy men in the course of their wanderings entered a city. One of them, with wandering eyes and mouth agape, was looking at the marketplace, the stalls, the buildings, when he met his companion. The latter said, 'You seem to be filled with wonder at the city. Where is your baggage?' He replied, 'First of all, I found a room, and I put my things in it and locked the door, and felt totally relieved. Now I'm going about the city enjoying all the fun.' So I'm asking you, Vijay, have you found your room?" To M and the others, you see, the spring in Vijay's heart has been covered all these days. Now it is open. To Vijay, well, Shivanath is always in trouble and turmoil. He's been writing for magazines and performing many other duties. Worldly duties bring much worry and anxiety along with them. It is narrated in the Bhagavata that the Advaita had 24 gurus, one of which was a kite. In certain places, the fishermen were catching fish. The kite swooped down and snatched a fish. At the sight of the fish, about 1,000 crows chased the kite and made a great noise with their cawing. Whichever way the kite flew with the fish, the crows followed. The kite flew south and the crows followed it there. The kite flew north and the crows followed it after it. The kite went east and west with the same result. As the kite began to fly about in confusion, lo, the fish dropped from his mouth. The crows at once let the kite alone and flew for the fish. Thus relieved of its worries, the kite sat on the branch of a tree and thought, "That wretched fish was at the root of all my troubles. I've now gotten rid of it, and therefore I am at peace." The Advaita learned this lesson from the kite, that as long as a man has the fish, that is worldly desires, he must perform actions and consequently suffer from worry, anxiety, and restlessness. No sooner does he renounce those desires than his activities fall away from him, and he enjoys peace of soul. But work without any selfish motive is good. It does not create any worry, but it's very difficult to be totally unselfish. We may think our work is selfless, but selfishness comes in unknown to us from no one knows where. If a man has already undergone great spiritual discipline, then as a result of it, he may be able to do work without any selfish motive. After the vision of God, a man can easily do unselfish work. In most cases, action drops away after the attainment of God. Only a few, like Narada, work to bring light to mankind. I think I will end there. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is he still the same.